we need to kind of like get this going, because otherwise we're just going to be
So
like, oh man.
I move it out of the way if I want to clear my throat or cough, so that you spared that sound, like, you know.
But absolutely, you can make it more dramatic and just take the whole thing off and go or something.
Have a slow motion splatter video.
Yeah,
Oh,
and
yeah, there you go.
in these times of COVID, you don't want to hear somebody coughing in your ear, like, you know. It's very
Yes.
unnerving.
Yeah. Or like yesterday when I had allergies, I was trying to find something to mop my face up, and I was just sitting there going,
Oh, my word.
yeah, it's not good. All right, let's get this
Oh,
show on the
sorry.
road. Okay, so this is the GVDS community of practice on pretotyping and design sprints. This is going to be roughly around 90 minutes, and we're going to go over 3 different sections of this. The first one is going to be about the explanation about design sprints and pretotyping. In case you're not familiar with either or, we're going to walk through those. I'm also going to, through suggestions from other people, I'm going to include my own take on both practices, since I've spent a disproportionate amount of time with design sprints, and just this year I've been doing pretotyping. So I'd like to kind of give some views on that. The second part will be 3 examples of how pretotypes and design sprints have been working in the market. So how people have actually been using them currently. So not necessarily my own opinion, but it'll be showcasing what I've heard from other people and what I've learned from people like Leslie Barry over at Exponentially, who's very much into pretotyping, and sharing that knowledge with everyone here. Finally, we'll be doing a fun little experiment. It's not. I thought that trying to merge design sprints and pretotyping as like a walkthrough would be a little bit much right before a holiday season. So I've got a little bit of a surprise for everybody related to New Year's resolutions. So that should be pretty interesting. But before we get started, as usually the case, what I like to do is just for the panelists that are here right now, go ahead and make a brief introduction to who you are, what you're all about, and where you're coming from. Like what part of the world are you kind of tuning in from? So let's start with Abzul. Please.
Okay, it's Afzal. I'm from Johannesburg, South Africa. I'm currently working as a management consultant for my own account. And for the past 4 years, prior to that, I spent a decade in the C-suite of a large quasi-government organization, where, amongst other things, I was the de facto chief strategy officer. So when I finally had enough of them and decided to go out on my own, I concentrated on strategy and risk management. When we got locked down in March this year, I fortuitously watched a video on the Lightning Decision Jam, and that got me interested in the whole world of design thinking. It led me to read the Sprint book. I even reached out to Robert for some advice on capacitating myself as a design sprint facilitator. And yeah, and that's where I am. I'm really excited about next year, because I'm in the process of setting up or pivoting my practice, so to speak, to concentrate more on the facilitation of design thinking workshops, including design sprints. I started out life as a microbiologist, believe it or not, but that's another story for another time.
Well, the appeal of microbiology is really strong, so it would be a pretty interesting story to see how you went from that to strategy. Nevertheless, really great introduction, Abzul. Thank you. Verena, you're up next. Let's get into where you're from, what you're all about, and why you put your microphone up versus down, so that people didn't get that explanation before.
I think we have covered the last part with the microphone. It's just to mute and unmute myself. Also, it looks nice, right? You can see visually that I want to say something.
Yes.
So what am I all about? I'm really into data-driven, human-centered solutions, especially for ecological problems. Like I'm currently working in renewable energies and trying to foster innovation in our company. I'm calling from Frankfurt, Germany. And I think that's covered it, right? If I
think
forgot
so.
anything.
No, that's fine. Yeah. And always it feels like it's like, all right, Vernon's done. And then the T happens. There you go. That works. Let's move on to Mohammed. Mohammed, you were here yesterday. You're here today. So let's recap to see if anything's changed. Tell us who you are, what you're all about, and where you're coming in from.
Yeah, I'm still the same, basically. Thank you, Robert. And hi, Abzul. We were in a small design sprint early in like a week ago. So yeah. So basically, I work as a product manager, and currently I'm living in Lebanon. And so excited and have a really passion for everything related to product management and innovation. And so excited to see how we are going to approach to merge the design sprint and the prototype. So yeah, thank you. And let's see about the surprise you tell us about today.
We'll see where it goes. For those of you who are attending right now, you do have the option of coming over to our site and being a panelist so we can figure out who you are and what you're all about. You would be asked, but not required, to do an exercise towards the end of our session. So that's optional. But it's a way for you to kind of cross-collaborate with people that you have already been introduced to through the past 5 minutes. So at any time between now and then, if you'd like to just basically go into chat and say, hey, I want to be a panelist, and we'll bring you over and we'll start that all out. But until then, this is going to be information theater, where I'm going to be going through a mural that I had created earlier for this particular community of practice session. I'll go ahead and share that URL in just a second so that everyone, whether you're an attendee or a panelist, can see it. And you'll probably be asked to give yourself a name along with the animal that you are kind of assigned, and we can kind of go from there. So, right, let's put this to all panelists and attendees. So when you come in, not everything is locked down in this mural. So, design-wise, you don't have to move anything, but you can follow me once everyone goes in there. And when I share my screen over in Zoom, you'll be able to follow me as well if that's easier for you. Okay. So as people are kind of dialing in or kind of coming into this, this mural is going to be going over, again, first prototyping and then design sprints, how the two merge, and then eventually an exercise that you have the option of kind of getting involved with. So at different points, I'll be kind of summoning people to look at the same thing I am within Mural. So what that happens is typically I'll just hit summon and you're magically transported for what I'm looking at. So, but you can, decide to move in a different place if you like to. So let's get into prototyping for those of you who are not familiar with it. And again, for people that were here yesterday, this is a bit of a rehash, but essentially prototyping is a way of testing the desirability in a particular market for your idea or concept. And the goal is, as Alberto Savoia, who's the progenitor of this, says, that you want to build the right it before you build it right. So you want to make sure you're actually building something that people want. This originally was developed in Google in 2010 when basically Alberto first started there as the first official engineer for the company. He released something called the Pretotyping Manifesto and had a PDF out that was called Pretotype It, which explored his approach to basically using the scientific method or hypothesis building to figure out whether or not something was desirable or not. And then that was further refined by several different people, whether that was Tina Seelig, who just came out with a book on creativity, Richard Cox Braden. A lot of people started getting involved with the effort with it, started teaching more at university, and then eventually it became a book, which was released about a year ago, early last year, where Alberto did some videos to support the effort, kind of explaining what it was all about, how to do it yourself, what different prototypes were out there to choose from, and really encouraging people to experiment with the market before actually going down the path of doing any kind of really involved process to take a business idea and put it through a product development lifecycle. I will say that there's a community that's started up by exponentially is Leslie Berry. If you double click on that, you'll be able to get an invitation to that Slack channel. And they do a number of things like test XYZ hypothesis. They have, I believe, a masterclass that they just started about 2 months ago for prototyping, but you can find out most of that content there. The one thing I want to say about prototyping is that it's not for everyone. There are certain people that Pretotyping aligns with them very well, and other people struggle to execute. And this is just over the past 8 months I've been kind of interacting with people. Usually the demeanor of the individual or the teams that they tend to be more risk averse. They're intolerant of micro failures where they don't suddenly shut things down if things don't go well. And this particular process seems to be more aligned with metrics and analytics, and it's less interested in opinions and consensus building. So it really has data drive all of the conversations forward. There's also something that I've discovered with this is that it has multiple phases. So the Write It, the book, covers the first part, actually creating the first prototype, seeing if there's life on the other end of the line, if it has potential. But the phases speak to a more organic way of how this evolves over time and how much time and energy and attention you would bring to a successful prototype to see if it has permanence in the market, it has relevance, it actually appeals to multiple groups. So it takes time to really manifest to see where it goes. Whatever the case may be, usually prototypes have somebody at the core that's a good champion, somebody who, no matter through thick and thin, will stay with it until they've exhausted their options from experiments. But usually they're intrinsically motivated to see this all the way through. And they also have the patience to see where it goes. So prototyping isn't just something where you just build something out of cardboard and create it and see what people react to it, as opposed to the core idea. But there's something about it where you need a certain time in the market to really get the right data to really see whether or not it's going to be relevant. And to that effect, these things that you create, these experiments, have to be believable. You can be fast and cheap, but you have to, at some point, there's a certain Goldilocks effect, like in design sprints, that you need to have so that when people experience your prototype, there's a benefit of the doubt that some of it is new, so they'll give you that. But it also has to have a certain polish to it so that it seems official, looks official, and that when they engage with it, it's actually going to be something worth their time. So I think it's worth saying those particular points about prototyping. This is just my own view, but this is what I've been seeing as I've been exploring this process over the past, like say, 7 or 8 months. If you want to learn more about it, since I've been sharing, I shared the Miro with everyone. Each of these are clickable links. You can go all the way to the Write It book. You can go to a video lesson library from Alberto himself. There's the Stanford seminar that I first watched that got me interested in prototyping that sums it up very well. There's other submittals here that other people have done. America, who just joined the call, put up Pretotyping at Work, which is a PDF from Jeremy Clark on how his experience about using prototypes in different work environments. There's also an interview I did with Alberto earlier this year with Sandy Lamb on asking particular questions about prototyping that weren't apparent in the book. So all of those are clickable. You can go ahead and search on those if you'd like to, if any of those look interesting to you. And that's it for the first part of the explanation around prototyping. If you have any questions and you're an attendee, you can put those in the Q&A section so that they're kind of logged and we can look at them. Or if you're on the panelist side, you can speak up now and make any comments or questions you like. And if we don't hear anything, we move on. So let me know what your thoughts are at this point after going through the initial kind of description of prototyping. Nothing? All right. Let's move on to design sprints, which is something I'm pretty familiar with, doing a lot of it. Now, if you've never encountered it before, this is basically the official explanation from the Design Sprint book website. Essentially, it was originally created as a 5-day process for going from concept or idea all the way to a testable prototype and getting data around from people and their opinions on what they thought about what you had created. And essentially, its appeal was that you could take what current product development processes were and speed them up, really get to the core of the matter, the meat of the matter, around whether or not your idea had any relevance to your target audience, or if it was full of assumptions that were deemed not to be relevant. So this has come around, I think now this is around 2010, around the same time as prototyping was first kind of batted around within within Google. And then Jake just kind of, that's just kind of evolved it from there. So originally, like I said, he tweaked the process, creating the framework while he was at Google, blogged about the process a few times while he was at GV, worked at Google Ventures, outlined the 5 phases of what that was. And then there were 2 books that came out. So it's important to know that's not just the sprint book itself that Jake has put out there, but Richard Banfield and Todd Lombardo also brought out one that had a spectrum of different techniques that derived from the original sprint book or the original design sprint process, but they took from Jake's original blogs and basically expounded on it through their own experiences and their own exercises. Then in 2016, when Knapp, Zaratsky, and Kowitz put out their official sprint book, is where everything started to come together. You had advocates on the agency side that were adopting it pretty fairly quickly. There was a lot of buzz behind it. I even, when I first read it in March of that year, I started testing it within Sabre for the UX teams. So it had a lot of traction really early with people that were in the know in design, but also wanted to try different things than just doing waterfall or Scrum waterfall processes within their organizations. Today, it's kind of an interchangeable methodology, meaning that it's got different processes and activities that correspond to design sprints. They can be retrofitted for different situations. The three I have here, the design sprint quarter is, or the sprint quarter from sprint, sorry, I'm mixing all my sprints and my Stephs. But Steph Cruchon, he basically envisioned, okay, what would it be like if after you were a design sprint and you were in an agile environment, what would this look like? Like, how would you basically make this map properly to both time and resources within a larger organization? What would you need to kind of cover? And when he came out with this, he basically surmised that it took about 3 months on a strategic level to take a design sprint process and have it touch on many different things. So this should be clickable. If you double click on it, it'll take you directly to the article or the website, I think, for Steph's website, or Steph's company, Design Sprint Ltd, and you can find out more about it there. I do believe he sends those out still as PDFs. There may be a downloadable link there now, but you can check out his work in terms of how he's kind of approached like the evolution of whatever comes out of a design sprint. Now, something I've had a little bit of insight on and did some initial work on was the talent sprint. This is from both Sabrina Gorich over at the Design Sprint Studio in Stuttgart, and Jeroen Frumau in the Netherlands. And the concept is that you can take the design sprint process and use it for finding talent, for being able to put people through the paces of a design sprint process and showing employers what their potential is. So they're currently really involved with this, with different companies and testing this out with HR. But this is another variation of the original design sprint process evolving to something that has tangible application in the marketplace. And then you have my own outfit. So it's shameless plug here about the Global Virtual Design Sprint. Done 5 of these. And essentially it was to take people who had done master classes and give them the opportunity to go through an actual environment. That person looks familiar right there. Who is that? That looks somewhat, I can't place it, but somebody. Anyway, and as it's gone through every year, it's changed every single time, to the point now where in the next version, we're going to be doing actual challenges from people, from organizations like Habitat for Humanity, Goodyear. Like there's basically people who publish abstracts and have challenges for the open public to basically submit their solutions. We're going to be aligning with those much more in the future, especially for in April. So these are the 3 examples I can give that kind of take the design sprint and go in a completely different direction or adopt from it. Americo, what are you doing over there? There's the enterprise design sprints. Yep, there's a link over there for that. The one thing what's that?
It's a new book by Richard
Banfield.
Banfield, yeah. He shipped this new book last year, and it's like a second version of the black cover of the design sprint.
It's an updated version.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. I read the original when it first came out, but if they've updated it, I'd be keen to see what they've done with it. Yeah. So here's my take on design sprints. Currently right now, they're a great intro to design thinking. If you've never done them before, you haven't been exposed to design thinking, this is a really great way of kind of introducing you to a recipe that works, that takes from design thinking and adapts to it. It really brings teams together. So the thing that's been persistent for me doing virtual design sprints over time is that it helps people learn from one another, and it also helps them learn cohesively about a problem space. So much so that when they feel like they've adopted the problem to the point where they can move forward with it. So that's been consistent every single time, is that usually if a team really gels together, they work well, and they just go in a direction that is self-propelling most of the time. There are a couple of things that are going in a different direction where I think that, and this is just me, but I think that the era of design sprints is over. The golden era of it is where it was an outlier. It was a differentiator. I think 2019 was probably the apex, and that's where it kind of no longer became something that was of a competitive advantage. It was more of something that you need to know to be a comprehensive designer. So like I had mentioned with the exercises of how things are customized, that's pretty much where design sprints are. They're all about basically taking some of the tried and true exercises and retrofitting them for different contexts and combining them with different methodologies so that they produce different outcomes. I also think that the process needs updating. There right now, as we speak, there is or in about 7 minutes, there's another event that's going on, which is the 10-year anniversary of the design sprint, which is fantastic. And it's wonderful that they're doing that. But from my point of view, I think that there's been enough dialogue and discussion about design sprints and enough published about it where there needs to be a second act. There needs to be something that says, okay, this is the design sprint, but now here's how it expands in different directions. And I think it needs to come from the original authors. I think they have a certain take on it that they've had in their workshops, but I just think it needs some sort of kind of refresh around where that's going to be going. Then finally, like Alberto put here, the Enterprise Design Sprints link is also there. Let me ungroup this so you can you can click on it. But there's also other resources as well. There's the original Design Sprint book. There's the official Google Design Sprint kit, which has activities and references to all of the different activities within a design sprint and has them in step-by-step processes. We mentioned Richard Banfield. He has a real interesting infographic on whether or not you should do a design sprint or something else, as well as an article I wrote on practical resources you can use for your design sprint, which includes a lot of those different ones. AJ and Smart has a huge library of different content related to how to do the 4-day process that they've championed, as well as how to do activities in a more efficient manner. So they did a lot of experimentation with the original 5-day process, and their approaches and methodologies are really interesting to try out if you're still in the kind of exploration, execution phase of doing design sprints on your own. So there's that intro to design sprints, or at least the kind of exhaustive explanation. If anybody on the panel has any questions about this or any comments, feel free to come off mic and do so. If anyone on the panel, on the attendee side, would like to make any comments, go ahead and put those in the Q&A, and we'll get to those as soon as we see them. Oh, Schumann, I will bring you over. Hang on one second. We have a Schumann sighting. She was someone that was part of the GVDS previously, and she was also a panelist yesterday when we went through experimenting with design sprints, so I'm glad she's back. Hi, Schumann. How you doing? You eventually come off, I know.
Hello,
there you go.
Everyone. Hi. So I was there yesterday too. So I just introduce myself quickly. So I'm a US designer. I work for a B2B SaaS company. We use some exercise for this discovery phase and some design studios to validate some features development. So that's why I'm interested about the design sprint. And I come from Taiwan. I'm based in Paris, France.
Cool. Thank you for coming by. I really said it's nice to see you here. And Americo, you want to give yourself a short introduction since you came in right around the time I was going on and on about pretotyping, but why don't you give an introduction to who you are, what you do, and where you're located at?
Oh, okay. So I'm Americo. I'm based in Lisbon, Portugal. I work for myself, providing service in the range of marketing research, everything that is about research and how we can use research to build innovation pipelines and discover new ideas and turn them in initiatives, product, service that bring value to clients and for companies too. That's it.
And where are you calling from? Where are you based out of?
Lisbon, Portugal.
Okay, got it. That's right. I should know this by now. I've seen enough of your introduction so that I shouldn't forget this stuff. But yeah, you're gonna have to quiz me next time. It's like, Robert, I'm not going to tell you. You're gonna have to listen more closely and figure out where I'm at. Okay. Thank you for that, Americo. All right. So let's get into prototypes and design sprints and how they kind of combined the I would say the apex of this particular presentation. The disclaimers that I will put right up front is that I'm biased towards virtual design sprinting. So some of these approaches are, while they're going to be reflections of what I've heard and seen in the market, they are going to take a little bit of a bent towards virtual. My experience with prototyping is less than a year. So if I get something wrong from later on that somebody sees in the recording in terms of the methodology, then feel free to kind of point that out to me, because I'm always learning. The suggestions over here come from client experiences that I've had with not only myself, but with other people that I've done it in the past. So this is taking from actual applied experience. And then there's no right way of doing this. So take these as potential examples, but I wouldn't say these are blueprints. These are just potential ways of going about blending the two together that seem to work so far in the market. Okay. So we'll start with prototypes before sprints. So this is a way of validating your idea in the market instead of gaining consensus and problem framing. What you're really doing is you're trying to figure out if the market believes that what you are creating has value for them and how they're going to basically react to your ideas. So if you look at kind of a high level view, you're going to be generating some initial ideas, ranking them by effort and impact. How you generate those ideas can be on multiple levels, or you may have an idea already in place. But what you're really trying to do with these two is come to brass tacks about what you want to experiment with. And then everything here in orange is already what's in the prototyping process, getting a market engagement hypothesis, narrowing that down to X, Y, Z, like getting the X being the percentage or the number of the Y, which is the audience, and the Z is what they're going to be doing. And then you refine it for locality and relevance, who you want to engage and how you think they're going to engage, creating the prototype, and then getting to 10, whatever that is, 10 emails, 10 purchases, what have you. Then when you have that data that would support potentially a design sprint run, you review what's successful, conduct further research, do problem framing if you need to, and get a more of an understanding of the context around why people are engaging this, and then start a design sprint process in some fashion. So these are all the major activities. If you're not familiar with design sprints, they're going to seem a little weird, like sticky decision. No, we don't chew up our gum and throw it on the wall for something that we want to actually approve. Again, I would defer you back to the sprint book for these. But this is basically, in general, what you would do in a design sprint to get to basically understanding from your audience on what they like and don't like. The pros and cons for these are several. First, that if you go with a prototype first, you're going to validate your ideas and concepts in the market, and without having to invest in a design sprint, getting everybody together in the same place for 4 days and having them clear their calendar. You'll know right away whether or not the market cares. It's a lightweight execution that has a smaller group of professionals. In an enterprise environment, it could just take 2 people, and then they work with subject matter experts to refine their prototype. And then they have a list of different experiments that they can select to basically execute with collaborating with different people. And you get direct learning from potential customers and markets on what they're after. You have direct access to them. It's going to be no filter, no opinions, no anything else. You're going to know right away whether or not you're doing the right thing, or you're executing correctly, or you're not. But the cons to this is that it's difficult for teams who are unfamiliar with this concept to have an aversion to the concept of failure. So if they're not familiar with prototyping and the 9 out of the 10 of the experiments fail and the one experiment that did work barely worked, they may be turned off by either prototyping or the idea altogether. So it's not really a consensus building tool. It's really whether or not this is going to fly or not. And it's really challenging to pick up a single design sprint engagement if several prototypes are successful. So let's say you have the opposite spectrum and you have 6 out of your 10 that all are successful for different reasons. It just depends on what you're kind of focusing on. So it's either one of, so the extremes are where the danger lies with this, is that you could potentially have something that has no signal and everyone's turned off by it, or you have plenty of signal and you have a lot of involved conversations internally on what to choose. But either way, I would think that this, out of the three, this is probably your best bet, is figuring out what people are wanting before you actually go through a sprint process. Now, if you do sprints before Pretotypes, this is probably better for risk-averse organizations. So large enterprise companies, educational institutions, things that need a lot of buy-in or consensus, going through a design sprint first and really understanding the problem space is more of an advantage for those types of organizations. Then once you have a really good idea of where people are going with your idea, there seems to be consensus around the approach in the solution sketch. You have some sort of buy-in from the organization that you're working for or that you're collaborating with. Then you go straight to the Pretotype, but you do something a little bit different. You don't use the same design sprint team. There's a different team that comes around Pretotyping because it involves usually a different set of skills to actually execute a Pretotype. Usually, I found through experience that the team that does a design sprint really struggles with how to do Pretotypes. They're unfamiliar with them, even if they read the book. So there is a different set of skills involved with this. But you also, if you do the design sprint first, you have to decide on which parts of that solution sketch you are going to test. So far, from what I experienced, you don't do a solution sketch wholesale in a Pretotype. It translates into too much work on the back end. So you're going to have to refine exactly what the core value proposition is, morph that into a market engagement hypothesis and an XYZ, and then create a Pretotype that addresses just the main drive or the main draw about what your design sprint is meant to do. So that if you have some success, you can expand it from there. But you want to keep with the mantra of Pretotypes that they have to be fast, cheap, and believable. And as long as you stay within that, that usually dictates that your test for your Pretotype is going to be also small as well. Several pros and cons. It's a carefully crafted approach to innovation. It emphasizes consensus, diversity of opinion, understanding. It's more safe. It measures risk, measures and manages risk at different phases, which is highly desirable for people that want to keep abreast of what's going on but not be involved with it. It also refines the purpose and execution of whatever Pretotypes you're going to be doing, especially down the road. You'll have that to fall back on. The major cons is basically cost and being able to put the product development lifecycle with design sprints as an upfront expense to validate what you're going to be Pretotyping, when Pretotyping is better suited to be right in front to figure out whether that cost is even needed. You may find that the original challenger idea may not be what the market wants out of your design sprint when you do Pretotypes, and you'll have to do a reset to figure out if you were actually concentrating on the right thing. In environments like enterprises and educational institutions, this can be a political time bomb where if this thing goes south and there's nobody wants to engage it, there's going to be an inevitable kind of, okay, where does the blame lie game, which does happen. You know, who's going to take responsibility for the fact that you did a design sprint, but it didn't work out? Sometimes that's a hard conversation to have, but it does happen. Also, the longer time frame with doing a design sprint up front leaves the entire effort susceptible to different unplanned events. Someone gets sick, someone leaves the company. There's strategic directions that happen that are nobody's fault, but it's just the business wants to steer the ship in a different direction. There's new leadership that comes into play, and they have a different idea about how they want to approach innovation. All of this, especially if you have anywhere from a 2 to 3 month model with design sprints and Pretotyping, could upend it pretty fast. So the more time you take to get to market, the better the more time you take to market, the higher the risk may be for you and your team to basically get some certainty around your idea or your concept and how the market would engage it. And then finally, there's Pretotypes and design sprints. So combining them in the same stream where you're validating market data over user opinions. It's really a splice in a very simple way. Eventually, you do the design sprint as planned, but when you get to the stakeholder approval, when you get to the solution sketch, the one that you decide as a team, you stop, you get stakeholder approval of that particular solution sketch. You figure out what people like and don't like about it. what they find value in. And based on those conversations, you do the kickoff as you did in the previous step with the design sprint, the prototype teams, taking in the approvals and the goes from your stakeholders, doing a prototype process, and eventually doing a go no go call for phase 2. So whether or not somebody's the business or organization is going to take what you're doing and bring it into like more time and effort and resources. So the advantage to this particular one is that you blend the best of both processes, you re-engage stakeholder interest and focus at several points, and you validate your progress through real market data rather than 5 people and their opinions, which can be subject to the interpretation on the executive and leadership level as well. That's just what they think. They don't know the business. They more often than not, metrics and data, if it's relevant and done well, will move the needle for people that are in leadership positions that have to make critical decisions. So this tends to have more weight and more traction with them than it would be if you're just getting opinions from testers. The cons are very similar to the previous one in that the original challenger idea may not be what the market wants, and you may have wasted a lot of time in the very beginning kind of designing for the wrong thing. If you take something that's not fully baked to stakeholders, there's the tendency for them to feel like they have carte blanche to design part of it or redesign part of the effort. And that may set you back a couple of steps to recalibrate how you're going to do your prototype, or it may upend your original rationale for doing the design sprint first. And another dynamic that I've seen and somebody else told me about was that the long-term goal and sprint questions that come from a design sprint don't tend to blend well or align well with prototyping, because that's projecting in a far future and asking questions that may not be validated through data unless you have those sprint questions asked in such a fashion so that they're going to be answered by data, if that makes sense. Because more often than not, the sprint questions are answered by opinions through conversation. But if you switch that dynamic and now you're doing things from 10%, 20% of the audience or this, sometimes they don't properly fit together. The puzzle pieces don't quite work. So as long as you keep that in mind when you're kind of thinking about the long-term implications of whatever you're doing, you are kind of keeping a data or a metric mindset when it comes to kind of crafting those. So those are the 3 different modes of kind of combining these 3 methodologies. Again, if you have questions on the participant side, go ahead and put those into the Q&A. If you have any questions on the panelist side, you can do what Mohammed did and put your hand up, or you can use an emoji and put your hand up that way. Either way, I'll find a way to get in touch with you. So Mohammed, take it away. You're up first.
Okay, thank you, Robert. So I have a couple of questions. So for the second approach, the essential element of Pretotype is basically you calculate time to data, and you need to short this time to data you have. So you mentioned that with the second approach, the disadvantage is the long time frame, and it could take like 2 to 3 months. So why is that basically?
So the 2 to 3 months that I mentioned comes directly from a recent experience I had with a presentation that someone gave me around their approach in an educational environment to design thinking and kind of using both prototyping and sprints to come to a conclusion. There's a lot of upfront kind of building up of the challenge and getting everyone aligned. And they literally take, I think it was like 3 or 4 weeks to have everyone on board with what this particular group was going to do for 12 months. In terms of their charge, because at the end they were actually pitching to VCs in their program or in their particular situation. So they added more than what's listed here. They actually had an engagement model of both the team and the school, as well as outside forces that could potentially take what was created by the team and put venture capital behind it to see how they were going to launch it. So that's where the 2 to 3 month example came from.
Okay, so basically, maybe it's not the process itself, but for your example, is the preparation to pitch to executives or something else, or is it like the design sprint and the prototype itself, the process itself, the structure you provided in the board?
Yes. Yeah, that if you were to kind of narrow it down into like the most compact version of all of that, You could potentially say if you take modern conversation about design sprints, where there's an acknowledgement that there's a problem framing week, there's a design sprint week, there's an iteration week, and then there's execution, then you're probably talking about a full month. So 4 weeks. If everything is if everyone's on board, aligned, communications well, everything's kind of set up, maybe the month before is to prep for that entire thing, kind of like we do with the GVDS. Then you could say like a month is where things start to getting engaged.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So, and the second question is also on the second approach. So after finishing the prototype and you get the result, so do you like conduct also a prototype to validate the prototype itself, not the market engagement?
Are you? Let me make sure I understand. Are you asking? Are you validating the prototype that comes out of the first part? Okay. So the prototype in the first part is to make sure that with the target audience they're thinking about, it's using the right language, it has the right appeal, it seems to do what they want to do. They get a proper opinions from their 5 or 6 or 7 interviewees on what they've created and where they think they should go and who they should market it to. But then the prototype takes that the experiment, the prototype is different in that it doesn't go back to those same individuals and show them the execution. It goes without context. So it's going to be for the target audience in a place that hasn't had all the conversations that I've had in the past. Now it's without that human-to-human conversation. What will people do with the idea as it stands alone, or the product or service? So that's probably the main difference between the two.
Yeah, and after getting the prototype results, are you like going to take those results and iterate or create a prototype to validate it with users?
It depends on if that prototype is going to has a success rate that would warrant like I think you had mentioned yesterday, it was someone that was like the scale that Alberto uses, where it's like very unlikely to highly likely, or whatever it is in terms of measuring that out. Or if you do enough of those experiments and your percentages are likely to very likely, then that's where you could say, okay, how much of that original design sprint effort is corresponding to this experiment that we've refined? Where are the parallels there? And then maybe like another kind of session where people kind of review what was done and what the prototype says and see what can be taken from that. And maybe that's where the iteration sprint happens, where you kind of if you continue to use the same sprint process, that's where you iterate on it and then revalidate with people through an interview style approach.
Okay. One last question. Sorry. So
I'm just marking them down. So you're now at number 4. So then you have 1 left, and then after that, you can't say anything else for the rest of the session, Mohammed.
Okay. So the third approach for the LTJ, after the prototype, after conduct a prototype, we should revisit the long-term goal, or like, because you put it as a disadvantage. So do you think that based on the prototype results or the trimeter, you should revisit the long-term goal?
Yeah, I think the long-term goal in the design sprint process, irregardless of the problem framing that's done, it's meant to align with the information and the research that you do, but it's still a guess. And I think what you're saying is probably more accurate in that it should be refined based on the data that you get. So it isn't that it's going to be not addressed and you throw it out wholesale, but you revisit it to say, how close were we? And what we were looking at the right research. I think the most important thing that's not stated here that I should have put in is that the retrospectives are key, because if you can't look back and really look at what you've done and be able to take the wisdom from that and really be able to get perspective, then you're likely going to make similar mistakes in the future. And retrospectives tend to be devalued or not as emphasized even in the design sprint process, but I think they're highly, beyond going over the results, that's where the learning really solidifies and the next steps kind of take hold. So it's the same thing with doing a prototype. You do that retrospective since you have both examples, and you say, let's do a replay and say, where do we get this right and where do we kind of not? And the things we didn't get right, were there things that we saw that could have clued us into something different that would teach us for future endeavors, where there's, and by that specifically, I mean the demographic or the locale or even the language. You know, I just talked to somebody recently that discovered that part of their audience didn't understand what vocational learning meant, even though it was central to some of their language around their prototype. So it's when you take those discoveries, how do you change your approach to either a prototype or design sprint in the future? Okay. Thank you very much for the questions, Mohammed.
I'm there till the end of this session.
If you want to do a silent kind of raise your hand, we have the emojis enabled in Zoom. I paid for the upgrade. Everything's good. So we can use those quite all right. Anything else from the panel side? Checking Q&A. Let me see chats. Ethics. Oh, so Daniela Paradis also says that ethics are also a con when you're working with companies. That is very true, because for some things that deal with prototypes, there is the notion that you're promoting something that doesn't exist, and you're actually gaming someone to gain their commitment without really providing any value. But there is that conversation of ethics that does happen, especially with kind of asking for money, which is something that I encountered in GVDS 5 by doing it, or 4 when doing an experiment there, but I refunded everybody else's money, so it wasn't too hard. Okay, if there's nothing else, we'll go right into the experiment part of this. So I'm going to caveat this by saying, I originally thought, okay, let's try doing design sprints and prototyping. And as I went through a couple of high-level kind of blends, I thought, it feels like we're kind of going through the motions, which was like something that plagued us in one of the early COPs. So I am doing a variation on this that I don't know if it'll work. But I'm going to give it a shot. This is all meant in fun. So hopefully you can join me in this if you feel up to it. This is both for panelists as well as for people that are just in here. And if you're looking at the screen, I'll bring everybody down to where I'm looking. What I'd like you to do is kind of first go through some New Year's resolutions that you have. So early on, it's not quite the new year, but essentially you're going to be thinking about what you want to change for 2021. Now, these are anonymous. Nobody's going to know what you're clicking on or what you're going to be doing. In fact, I'll hide. You can say, don't show me. Hide non-cursors, facilitator cursors for everyone. So I'm not going to know when you type in here, but I would recommend that you don't get too personal about what your goals are. So for in 2021, all you have to do is double click on one of these boxes here and start putting in something that you would like to improve on in the first quarter of 2021. And you like to just double click to do it. And when these boxes start filling in, we're going to use these kind of Christmas bulbs for a particular reason. So again, no one's going to know who's doing what. You can go ahead and put it in what you'd like. I'll put 3 minutes on the clock up here for you to work on it. And when we either run out of boxes or time, we'll move on to the next one. Again, this is optional. You don't have to do it if you don't want to, but I encourage you to do this because I think it'll be fun. It'll be interesting. And I will go off camera just really fast. So if you keep me off video, I will be back in a jiffy. And I also still have my AirPods on so I can hear if there's any questions that come up. All righty. So let's see what we got here. I see a few that are building a new startup, connecting with people, buying a Subaru. That's always eventful. Painting nature scenes, strengthen friendships. Okay, so we got a few up here. Now, what I'd like you to do is these Christmas bulbs have a purpose, and that what I'd like you to do is if you know which cards are yours, what I'd like you to consider is taking a Christmas bulb. So if I'm somebody that said networking intensively would be mine, let's say that was one of mine, but I see something else, I go, you know what? I want to strengthen my friendships. Go ahead and take a Christmas bulb and go ahead and put it somewhere on the card right here and kind of hanging it from the card as a way of saying, oh yeah, you know what? This is something I like to do in 2021 as well. So go ahead and take those bulbs and put them on other cards that are not yours, where you say like, this is something else I'd like to do. And we'll see how that kind of vets out. So you can take red or green, doesn't matter, any one you'd like, but they all can be hung up in different places. Just make sure they are on the card that is not yours, but you would like to do. And I would play Christmas music, but I don't have it queued up. Oh, and hey, Josh, I'm catching you on YouTube. You said in the case when you do the Pretotype first and the sprint second, what would you actually be testing in the sprint? Is it more than designs / usability versus attractiveness of the concept idea? So it would be if you had validated a particular Pretotype, and then you were going to do a sprint on it. The idea would be is that you would take the rationale and the data from the original Pretotype, and then you expand on it with a group of people to see what their particular approach of it might be in terms of where it could go, what the audience is, kind of expand on the parameters of the Pretotype, and basically fleshing it out a bit, putting a little bit more research, putting a little bit more time into it, and kind of shooting for like either you can do those 5 interviews, but usually if you start with Pretotypes, I've seen people also just use the first half of the design sprint process and then go straight into another Pretotype, but with more knowledge, more depth, more context, and it helps to kind of better inform those efforts. So hopefully that answered your question. I may have been a little late with that. Let's see here. Okay. So if we're looking at these, it looks like there are 3 of them that have 3 bulbs on them that are 4, excuse me. There's 4. And I'll just color these differently so that they have a little bit of visual acuity, where these ones seem to have a lot of relevance overall. So I'm going to take these, put them over here. I'm going to do it in a, not that way, do it in a column. So when you look at these 4, and again, this is just for fun. So let's kind of just approach it from the perspective of, let me kind of change this a bit so that it is all aligned up top. There we go. And I'll take out these. So when it comes to these particular New Year's resolutions, we're going to take the long-term goal approach from the design sprint. It says, what long-term goals are you trying to achieve with these New Year resolutions? So this is strengthen friendships, network intensively, visibility as an expert in my role of field, and deeply engage collaborators in business dev. What would be the end goals for these, the long-term goals, maybe like 2 years out or a year out if you want to do that? What would be the end result of you networking intensively, for example? What would be the end result of you strengthening your friendships or visibility as an expert in my new role or field? What would that allow you to do if you had achieved that particular resolution that you have? So go ahead and choose whatever row you'd like. The card corresponds to the row, even though it's to the left. Just move. Let's move to the right, just move to the left to kind of fill in the cards. Again, we'll take about 3 minutes for this and go ahead and put in your particular rationale or your particular long-term goals that you want to achieve with each of these. And we'll see where it goes. I'm actually going to make this 5 minutes just so that people have a little bit more time to think about this. I'll come back. Also, if you are done, if we have 2 minutes left, but if you are done with what you're doing, go ahead and put that in the chat. Just type in done. If you're on the panelist side and you've got put all your inputs, and then I'll know to kind of move on to the next phase of this. And if you want, if you are done, by the way, you can do the same thing we did with the globes here, the tree globes, and put them on the particular cards that are not yours, that you think also reflect why you would kind of your long-term goal around a particular resolution. All you have to do is just click and drag those globes over to ones that you see that are not yours, that you also say, you know what, that's something that I also correspond to, that I also think is a really cool long-term goal for the resolution that's there. Okay, let's take a look here. Out of the resolutions that we have on the right, looks like there's a couple of them that have a lot of interest. Learn more about cultures, different cultures and people's passions is one for this one. So again, I'll mark this one with a blue. And then there's a ton of them on visibility as expert, my new role in field. So I'm going to bring those over this, kind of color them. And just give me one moment. I'm going to set this up for, I'm going to say top New Year's resolutions. Kind of do this a little differently. So one of them was networking intensively. And I'll skip the explanation this time around, and I'll just put this one. So there's the resolution and then the long-term goal that corresponds with it. In fact, let's do, no, I won't go too far into that. We'll just, for the sake of example, we'll just do this. Oops. Oh, come on now. Sometimes Miro, for whatever reason, if you click on it and keep your mouse clicked on it too long, it thinks you're trying to select the text inside the box, which is the strangest thing. It never used to do that before, but now it does. I don't know why. All right. So here we go. There are two particular New Year's resolutions and the long-term goals associated with each. For the networking intensively side of things, you want to learn more about different cultures and people's passions. But as a visibility as an expert in your new role or your field, you want to build your brand, develop your career potentially fully and be recognized, valued, and paid accordingly. And you also want to get more opportunities or traction and contribution to communities. So what I'd like to do is something, I'm going to change this around. Instead of a market engagement hypothesis, let's call it, again, this is just playing around, a personal engagement hypothesis. So it's a PEH for whatever reason. And the example I had in here is in order for me to lose 30 pounds and maintain that weight for years to come, I'm going to join an online fitness club that requires me to log in and keep a digital copy of my progress over the next 3 months. This is just an example. So if weight loss was one of these things, so it was New Year's resolutions, this could be a potential example of what that looks like. What I'd like you to do, if you were someone that put these New Year's resolutions or even contributed to the long-term goals of each of these, go ahead and try writing a personal engagement hypothesis here on how you would basically network intensively to get to this long-term goal. What would be your engagement? What would you do to kind of get to that point? And see if you can summarize it in a couple of sentences. You just have to double click on whatever text that's here. Oops, you should be able to do that. Hang on, is it locked? Better not be locked. Or the bot, oh, okay, there we go. For some reason it didn't work before. And just go ahead and write out a couple sentences on the engagement hypothesis you would have for yourself. And you can use any of these particular examples. So if your New Year's resolution was aligned with visibility as an expert, then you can choose one of these three particular or several of them to these particular long-term goals that would reflect how you would write out your particular engagement model. Again, this is optional, but go ahead and give it a shot just to see how it kind of turns out for you. And while you're doing that, I'll basically kind of change the design of this a little bit. Okay, so I'm looking here. There's one still being done. There's a couple of them being edited. So one of them that's done says, if I can clearly, opportunely communicate the value I can bring to companies through the experience and skill set, I will get more opportunities for traction and contribution. And another one is if my potential and skill set is communicated clearly and visibly, people, collaborators, clients, bosses, and opportunities will align so that I can use and continuously further develop my full potential. In this way, I will maximize my impact and minimize friction, reduce the maximal value, and get paid my worth while doing what I love. That works. In order to learn more about different cultures and people's passions, I'm going to be engaged in at least 20 remote global events from different industries in order to have a wider, different perspective on what the world means to others. Wow. That's like a global event, more than one global event every month. That's a lot. In order to learn more about people and learn about different cultures. Uh-oh, is that the same thing? Oh no. I will start a group within my network of friends so we can meet regularly, bring other trustworthy friends to the circle, explore opportunities to get it. Okay, these all look really good. There's another one that says, in order for me to attain visibility as an expert in my field, I will leverage opportunities to create and publicize thought leadership content. Very nice. Okay. So all of these encapsulate some different particular possibilities to get to your long-term goals based on the resolution that we've been kind of doing as a group. There's still one person working on it, but I'm going to direct your attention down to step 4 down here, where you can write your hypothesis to map your engagement. So this is literally taking the XYZ, but reframing it in a different way. I included the examples of how to create an XYZ hypothesis from the book just for educational purposes. So you can see how it's done in the right IT in terms of how it goes about with things, especially if you add a W to it. But for this particular exercise, it's going to be a little different. So again, this is me kind of doing a bit ad lib. You're going to copy and paste your PEH, your personal engagement hypothesis, and put that in a space that's available. So let's say if I go back up here, I'm going to take, if I can clearly opportunely communicate, oops, if I can select it, there we go. I'm going to take this one if it's not there already, and I'm going to put it down in this space here, just like that. So what I'm going to do is when I see this particular one, if I can clearly communicate the value I bring opportunities. So you're going to kind of think about how this engagement process work if you were going to test it. So start with to do this. You're going, and the whole phrase is when and where you're going to do this. This amount of your time is going to be spent to do this. So I should say spent to do this, if that would help kind of understand it. I'll just put to do this. So in this example, it's communicate the value I can bring to companies through my experience and skill set and get more opportunities for traction. Okay, the why or the how, I don't know if is detailed here for this person, but it may need to. But once you figure out how you're going to do what you say you're going to do here for the outcomes that you want, what action you're going to take, you're going to go into this square right here and say what part of your time, what amount of your time are you going to do? So this amount, so it could be like 10% of the month of January, or say February, if you want to need some planning, is going to be done this to achieve this, and when and where you're going to be doing it. So actually, this should be, I'll take that back. This should be in the month of February. In the month of February. 10% of my offline time outside of work. So how you'll basically kind of map of what you're going to be doing here. We'll be doing this to achieve this particular goal. So what exactly you're going to be doing to communicate the value you can bring to companies through your experience and your skill set. What exactly is that going to, how is that going to manifest? So if you're the owner of that and you haven't put it over here yet, feel free to kind of elaborate on this a bit from what I've done and just change around what you think should be there. And let's see what comes out of this. There's already a couple that are done, it looks like, but let me check chat. Okay, no problem. Let's see here. So in this one says, in order for me to attain visibility as an expert in my field, I'll leverage opportunities to create and publicize thought leadership content. So in each month of 2021, 10% of my available time each month will be reserved to create and disseminate thought leadership content. So it's creating and disseminating. So something that you're going to be, some activity you're going to be doing. And then the month of February, oh, that's one we're just doing. So we go down a little ways further, and it said, looks like this is Americos. To understand, learn about different cultures, he's going to go to Facebook, and in 4 days of my time, 4 Saturdays, so four days on the weekend in January, is going to be reserved to get together live with my friends and their friends. So he's going to kind of get a community event together for people to meet regularly and network and share opinions and so on. So kind of a collective conversation, so to speak. So as you're getting these done, or at least as you're kind of building these out, the last step, and it's fairly simple, is to take the chosen resolution that you've been working on. So if this all corresponds to these, so you have 2 really, it's networking intensely or your visibility as an expert in your role or field, and I'll copy these down here. So you can choose from one of these resolutions in step 5. And then for the XYZ, the WXYZ that you put in here, you'll take one of these rows and start with the first step and take 5 steps to get where you need to go. So if you're going to be you're going to be creating and disseminating thought leadership content, this example, how will you go about doing that in 5 steps? What are some specific concrete actions you're going to take for this particular resolution? And when would you start? So the start date is probably going to be pretty simple, because it says in the first 3 months of 2020, well, sorry, in each month of 2021. So that means that the start date for that particular one would be, for example, January 2021. And you can be even more specific and say January 5th, 2021, if you wanted to. But this gives you a definite starting point for what you're going to be kind of working on in terms of your chosen resolution. And let's see how that goes. So first, work on your WXYZ, fill all that out and get that done. When that's done and engaged, go over and select a column that you want to basically put in your particular resolution and how you're going to achieve your particular resolution through the hypothesis that you put in there. And I know, realize I could have put the box of the pen there for reference, but let's just see how you kind of build these out. I'm going to go back to the engagement hypothesis over here in the XYZ, just to see what people have done. It's interesting. It's really interesting. There's a higher social element to some of these resolutions than normally would, but it gets back to basically relating to each other as humans for some of these. Social media 5 times a week in January, 1 to 2 hours per day. Okay. Somebody's starting right at the very beginning of the year. They're not fooling around. It's like that start date. As soon as New Year's happens at midnight, everybody else can pop the champagne. Whoever wants to be the expert in their new field of role is going to be going right at it. They are not waiting. So while everyone's wrapping up their columns, if anyone who's an attendee or anyone on YouTube would like to ask some questions and kind of pre-populate those before we get into the Q&A part of our presentation, feel free to do so. And after we kind of do a little bit of back and forth with the panelists, we'll address those Q&As with the time remaining that we have. So we have one done already. Go down here and kind of zoom in a bit. So for this particular resolution for this individual, visibility as an expert in your new field or role, it looks like the steps they're going to take is cooperate with experts in the field for events, join articles with experts leading up to the events, associated social media posting, building my own repo and publish, and have networking coffees at least 2 times the month with stakeholders and experts. So it's literally like the to-dos to build out their particular engagement model is, for that one, is multiple. So they're going to have multiple like fields of multiple touch points with the intended audiences and how they're going to engage. Same thing with this second column. They're going to define who they want to reach and their needs, look for inspiration, how to contribute to those needs, develop a sustainable content process, define and set my content editorial calendar, and analyze results and start iterating. Interestingly enough, some of these seem to be macro steps and some of them seem to be micro steps. Like I can easily see this one being cooperate with experts in the field for events is more of a themed kind of action. Whereas define and set my content editorial calendar is explicit. So there's certain things that this individual will be putting in their hard dates to kind of keep the commitment of being seen as a visibility as an expert in their particular role or their field. For Americo, for networking intensively, getting an idea of the friends' locations, the ones that are close to me, checking their subjects and of interest and listing them, building some consensus. Invite a couple to them to work at the first networking, the first virtual event, share the event with circle of friends, and then meet in the next week. So as soon as possible in January, but his line of thinking is that he's trying to establish repetition, habit, like a repetitive process so that this can build over time, which is right in line with how you want to kind of build an audience or a community. It will take time, but it'll be repeated instances of that. Same thing with we go back to visibility as an expert. This person says they want to identify the target market, the channels of communication, schedule content topics. So a lot of kind of exploring the space to see what makes sense, determine the success measures and how they want to measure that, whether or not their efforts are successful, and then go for it. That's going to be in the second week of January. So they're plan, and then execute. For networking intensively, like Americo, this person said wants to explore global events, reach out to current connections and check what they're interested in, building an MVP calendar budget and set learning path based on the MVP calendar. So this one is more, what does the world currently offer? And then based on what's available, kind of building and kind of exploring what the investment of money and time would be, as well as where exactly they would engage, what would make sense, and then sharing those with others and iterating them in a live fashion. So seeing what the world has to offer, having their own plan on what they want to do to be get that personal MVP status, and then start sharing and exploring it with others. So that's an interesting way of doing it. I think I've covered almost everything here, I think. There's one more. There's another visibility one where it's start to write something I learned from the book, webinars, work, or life. Learn to use different social media channels. So this one definitely has a publishing play to it. Analyze the audiences and gain more insights, improve the content quality. So this approach to visibility is more content driven and basically creating to share the conversation about what the person knows and what they're interested in, which is what I align with and identify with because I do the same thing. Whereas if you talk about the third column here, it was more strategic, looking at where all the possibilities are, getting some success in mind, and then going after the create. So it's almost like the third one is the first part as from a strategy perspective, and then the fifth column is the execution in terms of where you can actually put all the content. So it's interesting. Everyone has a different approach to things, but they're all kind of interconnected in some fashion, in some way. They seem to align in different places. So there hasn't, I'm going to check YouTube. I don't think there's been any chatter over there yet, but I can just double check really fast. Nope, we're good over there. And there hasn't been anything put in the Q&A. So what I would encourage you all to do is if this is helpful for you, feel free to take the content that's here in this mural and kind of retrofit it for what you want to do for your New Year's resolutions in 2021. If you think it's actionable, if it's a good starting point for you to think about how you want to be visible as an expert or to network more intensively, then definitely take this as a beginning recipe on how you could execute. And that was the original intent with doing this experimental exercise, was to give you some insight into how to basically go about it. And beyond that, if you want to come on mic and let me know what you thought of this entire presentation or process, anything you would change or modifications to it, I'd be more than happy to hear from you and get your perspective on things. No, you're all extremely satisfied with everything. No problems, no issues. You got what you need in terms of your resolutions. You're all set to go for 2021. Perfect. Okay, let's stop.
Thanks, Robert. It's really been a fantastic experience, very informative, and I think the last part with that experiment has really worked out. I'm feeling great.
Okay, good. Schumann, what about you? What have you were at yesterday's event? What did you think of this session?
Compared to yesterday, because I was not really familiar with prototyping. So today we have some design sprint. We added in some design sprint stuff. So I'm more familiar, and really informative, and also I think it's really a fun way to do this kind of exercise. We learn something, and then you give some comments when we try to do some exercise, and then you just compare and analyze. Different people have different approach. I think it's interesting.
Yeah, I think so too. That was something that I appreciate about people in terms of how they go about things based on their experience and their disposition. So it's always interesting to see that everyone's got a different approach to doing the exact same thing based on either what they're good at or what they prefer to do. I find that enlightening a lot. Mohammed, what about you? What have been your thoughts so far?
Yeah, actually, it was a fantastic session, really. Thank you. And very interesting thing that you let us to prototype our plan for use Pretotype to plan our next year. So very, very insightful. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Okay. And Abdul, I know that you made some comments before. Did you want to add anything to this?
I'm good. Thanks, Robert.
Okay. And Americo.
Richard, I think you are in your way to work a book. I think you are improving very well the detailing of the dash. I think you could include those more expected scenarios in terms of enterprise, startups, solopreneurs, how this can be useful, and also the team that is behind the implementation. I know this is not standard, but some perspective about how it may be.
Yeah.
And in the outline of the steps, we have been taking one prototype as a reference, and then build those steps considering each prototype. Maybe it was not convenient for this session, but that is something that I was enjoying, because we think about a given prototype and we stepwise the development. That gives me a reference for each type of prototype, and I would like to keep that that approach, let's say.
Yeah, I also think that there's a missing component to some of this conversations around the proper team and figuring out what you probably need to have in your back pocket to execute well on the prototyping side. It's implied sometimes that the same skill sets are transferable, but you do have to kind of switch your disposition when it comes to doing prototypes versus doing design sprints. So yeah, I agree with you.
But always pleased to be here with your sessions.
Cool. As long as they're valuable and they're insightful, then
yeah,
I'm good. I can eat lunch in peace and not feel like, oh my God, what did I put these people through? All right. So we're at the bottom of the hour. We got to say adios. I'm going to stop the share on this side, and I will share out hopefully you have the link to the mural, so we're good. As always, we're going to do another kind of shot. But again, since we're getting close to Christmas, You can put anything you like that's Christmas oriented in your shot. So you can use a filter. You could use anything. I've got presents that I've just got done wrapping, so I'll use those.
Oh, I have nothing. What can I use? I don't know. I have nothing here.
You could draw a bow on like a Post-it note and do it that way. Like draw a face. There you go.
Something like.
No, that's not work. I'll just do the present. You can do what Shuming is basically like have a different mouth. That works. Oh, everyone's got different Christmas presents. All right. Are you ready? At one? Are you almost there, Americo? Or you need?
I don't know. Let's close the year.
Okay. There's just a mask. And Happy New Year. There you go. 1, 2, 3. You know, that's the first time I've ever seen a mask where the nose is more dominant than the mouth, and it's just basically on the lower lip and just covering what it needs to. All right, everyone, enjoy. Yeah, that's okay. Enjoy the upcoming holiday, and take care of yourself. Stay healthy, please, and we'll be seeing you hopefully next year in 2021. Yeah. All right.
Thank you. All right.
Everybody.
Be safe, everybody.
Nice seeing you again.
Bye-bye.
Bye.